Well, I guess that solves the age-old question of what would an album cover look like if it was designed by H.R. Geiger as well as Roger Dean, because I honestly can't be the only one that sees this. Tikaalika by Charlie Griffith. So Charlie Griffith is I don't want to say the other guitarist from Haken. Richard Henschel and Charlie Griffith are the two main kind of lead guitarists, kind of trading back and forth. I know Richard kind of has the predominant writing credit for the first 3 records of Haken, and Charlie's kind of come into his own within the gravitation of Haken, and you can see his influence a lot more within the more later albums. But now we see Charlie's solo work, and it is a little bit of a departure from the traditional Haken sound. And one of the things that makes this one very unique in Charlie's repertoire is that this is the first album for a very long time that he went in with the idea of recording and playing with a 6-string guitar. So all the songs on here are recorded with the 6th string. We don't have a whole lot of those genty drops that Haken has co-opted lately. So we kind of have that more raw approach and not having to lean on some of the more deeper tones of the guitar to get some pretty big sounds out of Charlie's playing. And Charlie isn't the only star performer on here, I might add. He does have a few guest performances on here. Tommy Rogers leads his vocals for the 2nd and 9th track of Arctic Circle and the last track of Under Polaris, which kind of reprises some of the themes from that, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And Tommy is bringing a lot of that Between the Buried and Me raw energy to it. We also have, and I'm going to try this, Daniel DeGo from Textures. He's lending his vocal works on the tracks 3, Ludium Beings, as well as 8 of Crawl, Rock, Run. I can get that. Vladimir Ludlak, I believe is how you Ludlak, from Organized Chaos on tracks 4 and 5 of In Alluvium, as well as Dead in the Water. And finally, Neil Purdy as well on track 5, and he's from Luna's Call. And each one kind of brings their own unique style, their own unique flair, but none of these singers seem out of place. They all feel very fit and very unique for the track that they are servicing. And of course, on drums, we have Darby Todd, who has played with Devin Townsend as well as Frost. So he has this powerhouse behind him that really does elevate the music even further, where you really need to have that energy and you really need to hit it home. As well as Rob Townsend, who plays with Steve Hackett on saxophone. And Jordan Rudess from Dream Theater pops in once or twice on the keyboards. And obviously he has some really interesting and standout moments, very impressionistic, jazzy, very ethereal in that sense. And it does lend itself very well to the music that's found around it. So before I dive right into the music proper, let's talk about the concept of this album, because it is a loose concept and it kind of tackles life way in the past. And I know that other metal bands have done this, like The Ocean with the prehistoric Phanerozoic suites, parts 1 and 2, that covers basically all the prehistoric life on Earth. That's kind of what we're having here as well, but mainly kind of the evolutionary leap or jump within specifically the Tikaalika. It's kind of the fish/lizard that first started to crawl on land. And this evolutionary jump between the fish that had to breathe in the water and not a mammal, but a reptile that could walk on land. And how they had these literal arms and legs to propel themselves. And yeah, it's just how far back within the evolutionary steps we had to go. On top of that is all of the history and the lost to time aspects of it. These records of these creatures are literally stone, and kind of how that phases in with their existence from the past and our relationships to them, and what we as the creatures now owe to these creatures of the past and our relationship with those. It almost becomes intangible. It's almost as though you're looking on life forms on another planet, because on some scale, you are. Like, our planet is vastly, vastly different than it was, millions and millions of years ago. So looking back to the creatures that once were and putting to music all of that. And, you've got some really heavy metal that's on here. So let's actually talk about the album proper. Now, the album itself is being led by a few singles off of this. The first one was Arctic Cemetery, which is the second track. The first track of Prehistoric Prelude is essentially just a quick opener. We've got some really nice, soothing, acoustic guitars that Charlie's putting down. It reminds me of a lot of the smaller moments of Haken from The Mountain, where it was just the slow build to then open up entirely into Arctic Cemetery. And Tommy, as I mentioned before, lends his vocals on this, and so it has that raw power of a Between the Buried and Me's track, but the dynamics and the orchestrations of a Haken track. And it's blended very well, and it's heavy hitting, it's hard, it's fast, and it never relies on any one technique to provide the crutch for the track. So many other bands would do gent drops in order to provide this meaty atmosphere. Other ones would just shred the entire time through to provide the technical prowess to lean on. This track and all the tracks subsequently never have a specific technique that really is the go-to crutch. Charlie is always trying something new. He's always trying something different to engage the audience and to engage the listener, whether that be the harmonies between a couple different, guitar sounds. He's always bringing something new and dynamic into the mix to provide a very listenable atmosphere in these very meaty and heavy riffs. The other single that was released, well, we had two other ones. The title track of Tikaalika. It's a brilliant, brilliant instrumental piece. I'm loving the ebbs and flows within this track. This is what I really, really come to for a progressive metal track. It's giving me flavors of a Dream Theater train of thought. It's very raw, but at the same time, it's very meaty. It's juicy and spicy in a lot of the different presentations. And at certain points, you even hear a Devin Townsend style arpeggio or lick in the backgrounds of a lot of these tracks, or in a lot of the movements within the title track. And the final track that he released in preparation for this is Luminous Beings, the third track. The thing that I love about this, and one that I will kind of spread across the entire album, is pretty much all the tracks on this album flow right into one another, very similar to a Between the Buried and Me Colors, in that it never really stops, it never really takes a breath. And in that case, it does kind of showcase and mirror the concept of evolution, in that evolution never really takes a stop, it never really takes a breath, and in that case it's also history never really stops, it always continues. We're kind of in the middle of it, and it is interesting, because Tommy Rogers came off of Arctic Cemetery, and Luminous Beings is feeling like a lot of the really strange and quirky moments that we would hear from Between the Buried and Me in Coma Eclectic, and being very weird and quirky. We're hearing some of those weirder, quirkier moments that we had from, say, Haken's Aquarius or Visions, being not being afraid to be strange and weird, playing with the minor keys in a very quirky aspect of it. So let's talk about some of the tracks that haven't been released, at least upon recording, and that weren't singles off the album, again, as of the recording. In Alluvium, the fourth track, I'm loving the heavy-hitting guitar licks that we would hear from, the metal scene from the mid 2000s, this burn, dun, 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 dun. Vladimir's vocals on this track is just jaw-dropping. I'm loving how thick and juicy they are, and some of the musical styles on this does remind me a little bit of some of the harder moments that Devin Townsend would be playing with. And I know I'm kind of leaning on other artists in this review, but man, I can't help but see the comparisons and see the influences. But unlike other artists that lean so heavily on it that it's almost impossible not to see, Charlie is just using it as a jumping off point to then move the music further on. If we want to talk about Devin Townsend influence, Dead in the Water, the next track is probably my favorite track on it. It starts off with this insane, like, and like, again, it's not quite genty in its approach, but man, does it have that drop on it that I'm loving. It's so heavy hitting. It's so hard punching. And I'm loving the high notes that we have on this as well. Even though this is probably one of the larger tracks off of the album at just under 9 minutes, it really takes a punch out of you, and it really doesn't slow down. From Dead in the Water, we come into Digging Deeper, and I'm loving the excavation sounds that we have on here. It's a little bit more somber, especially coming off of Dead in the Water, and it's like this much more eclectic style of music. We have a lot more overtones on the like synths being played on there, with some really interesting soundscapes in terms of the rhythm section on this track. It's very dark and very like menacing in that sense. It's very haunting. And then we go right into the title track that I've already mentioned. Danielle returns on the 8th track of Crawl, Walk, Run. That's fun to say. And this is when we're getting a lot of that really meaty and really juicy like thrash metal or speed metal. I'm getting flavors of some good Symphony X or Michael Romeo from earlier this year. Loving that presentation. And even though some styles of this type of metal can get repetitive and monotonous, here he's always trying something new and always adding a little bit more flavor onto it that then bleeds directly into the final one of Under Polaris that reprises the main themes of the beginning parts of this album that brings the whole album to a close. So yeah, holy geez, this album knocked me right, like it just knocked me out. It blew me away. I friggin' love this album. It always had me like wanting more and always delivering as well. Like a lot of albums leave me wanting more and then leave me unsatisfied. This always left me wanting more from the previous track and always delivered in the following track. I'm loving this album. I have been really hard pressed to like turn my head away from it, just based on, again, the heaviness, the unrelenting aspect of it, the continuous flow of music, how each track really does flow seamlessly into the next. At no point is it dull. It's always heavy hitting. And it's one of the best metal albums I've heard in the last couple of years. If you're into progressive metal, if you love Haken, if you love a lot of Haken's influences, if you love Dream Theater or Symphony X or Devin Townsend, you're going to like this album. You're going to really, really dig this album. This is an album that I highly recommend. It definitely gets the Note seal of approval. It's a run, don't walk to go and pick it up. I was extremely pleasantly surprised with this album. And so I can say that Tikaalika by Charlie Griffiths is one that I absolutely love with my whole heart. Man, the metal scene this year is killing it. So yeah, loving it, loving it, loving it. You gotta check this one out. Don't sleep on this one. Do yourselves a favor and listen to it. It drops this Friday upon this being released. If you're watching it in the future, it's probably already been released. So go and check it out. You're not going to be disappointed. So yeah, that's what I've got. So what did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know of your thoughts about it by commenting down below. That's all I got for you today. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, Notes out.